I came today to talk with you about teacher retention at my school. My school is Glenwood Leadership Academy, but also in high-poverty schools in general. But first I want to show you this number. This number is an important number. We're going to have a pop quiz on this later. It's going to work out just like chemistry class for Tyler. In order for you to understand how I feel about retention for teachers, I feel like you need to know a little bit about me and my school experience. I'm a product of the EVSC, proud product of Evansville Schools, and teacher retention is probably so important to me because of my own school experience. When I was in elementary school here at McGarry, I had the best teachers a child could possibly ask for. My kindergarten teacher was this gentle, kind lady. Her name was Mrs. Martin. She's kind of like everybody's grandmother. And what I remember about her most is that she taught me how to be able to recite my name, my address, my zip code, my parents' names, and my phone number. And if you did that correctly, you earned a sucker. This was obviously pre-Common Core, and it was also half-day kindergarten. I don't remember a lot else about kindergarten, but I knew I had the best teacher because my mother thought I had the best teacher. And my mother thought I had the best teacher because she taught my brother. In first grade, it's kind of a similar thing. I had Mrs. Ershig. Everybody wanted Mrs. Ershig. Her daughter actually works for the school district as a speech pathologist. She smiled all the time. She taught me how to read. That's a pretty important skill. She hatched chickens in her classroom, and she told my mom I was a little too social. If you know me, and some of you obviously do, she totally nailed that. Mrs. Ershig was the first grade teacher everybody'd want because she's so skilled, and the families all knew she was skilled because she taught all their relatives, she taught all their friends, she taught everybody's neighbors. Everybody knew Mrs. Martin and Mrs. Ershig, and they knew everyone. In my middle school years, the same phenomenon was true. I had a host of all these fabulous teachers, and by the time I was a student in Mr. Ossenberg's reading class, or Mrs. Wink's PE class, or Mr. Jones's math class, they already taught everyone I knew. They knew me. They didn't hold the rest of my family members against me, thank goodness. And when you start out like that with a teacher, the thing that is already established for you is trust, and it just makes the learning so much easier. We do not have time to talk about all of my fabulous teachers, and some grade levels should be left out because there's nothing fabulous to say. However, the great teachers that I did have all had something in common. They had a history with our school. Our parents knew and trusted them. They were invested in our school community. They worked as a team together, and most of them didn't leave. Even after I moved on to high school, several of those teachers, some of them in the picture here, tracked my progress and supported me. Sometimes I knew about that, and sometimes I didn't. They worked hard to ensure that I achieved at McGarry, but then they followed me beyond that. To illustrate the longevity of this, the last of these teachers on the right, Linda Wink, just retired from McGarry this year, and the teacher that's on the far left is also the picture on my Twitter account, if you've been on there today. That's my mentor, Jean Rickard, and she made sure that I went to college, and is definitely the reason I became a teacher. At GLA, we have teachers like this. They're fabulous. We have teachers like the ones I had and like the ones I just described, and they are currently working really hard to build those connections with our families. However, the difference at GLA is that the relationship between staff and families is not universally strong across the board because most of us have fewer than 4 years at our school. So every student that goes to GLA does not know every teacher before they get them. This is obviously very different from my own school experience. In fact, only 1% of the teachers in my building have more than 4 years in a classroom at our school. And as you might imagine, this impacts consistency for kids. Most importantly, every student at our school is not achieving their potential under these conditions. Now, let's go back to this number 71. 71 is an important number because this is the number of teachers I've hired in 3 years at GLA. You might be thinking, what's the big deal? Obviously, some of you sucked in your breath. That makes me feel a little better because I've been sucking in my breath for 3 years. The big deal is that I've replaced my entire staff almost 2 times in 3 years. The big deal is that I have unfilled jobs today that have been offered to qualified teachers who've turned them down. The big deal is that some of those positions have been offered multiple times to qualified candidates who just have other offers on the table, sometimes even with our own district, and there's no draw, there's no push, there's no reason to choose something harder, so they choose something else. I've offered my English job 3 times this summer, and I've offered my science job more times than I can number over the past 2 years and can't find a licensed teacher. So we'll be going into year 2 without a licensed science teacher at our school. I'm sorry, Mr. Dugan. That makes me feel really terrible. The biggest part of this that is frustrating is that it's not fair to kids. All the kids in all the schools deserve the best teacher. Larry Feriazzo, in an Ed Week article last year, reported that 40 to 50% of teachers nationwide leave the profession in the first 5 years. But if you work in a high-poverty, high-minority school, that statistic doubles. 71 new teacher hires at GLA mirrors that national data. What this means for GLA is while all of our teachers, and I mean every last one of them, is very talented, they are also very new. I think I have 2 teachers in the audience, and I'm going to give them a shout out. Tara Babin, Jake Van Winkle are 2 of the best teachers I have ever seen, but they still have under that 4-year threshold in our building, which makes them new to families at our school. The first time I received instruction from a novice teacher, I was in high school, and that was a student teacher. The inexperience that teacher had showed. They were brand new. In 13 years of my education in the EVSC, I never had a first-year teacher in any of my classrooms. In my children's experience in the EVSC, they both attend EVSC schools and are now both in high school. To date, neither of them has ever had a first-year teacher as their teacher. We can all make a list of reasons we think that high-poverty kids are not achieving at the same rate as their peers, but it's very clear that teacher turnover is part of that. Let's compare this to what a student might experience at GLA. In the last 6 years, with almost 100% turnover in all staff, if you're an incoming 8th grader, you've probably had at least 8 new homeroom teachers since 6th grade. Now, the probability that an incoming 4th grader has had at least half of their teachers be brand new is very high. I'm not going to figure that for you because there are math teachers in the room and that is not my area. But I'm not even calculating in their related arts teachers. We're just talking about homeroom teachers only. Those patterns of chronic turnover destabilize the environment for kids, and they also destabilize the environment for adults. So basically, most high-poverty kids in our community already have less access to quality preschool, they have fewer print resources in their house, and our system ensures that they're the kids that are going to get a brand new teacher. I'm just going to ask you to think about whether or not that's the right thing for children in our community, and if that would be good enough for the kids who live in your house or the kids you haven't had yet. I don't want anyone in the room to be confused. My school is full of amazing teachers. It's just that most of them are new. So the issue is not that teachers in high-poverty schools aren't good. They're generally fabulous. But most of us are not as good in year 1 as we are in year 5. And most of us are not as good in year 5 as we are in year 10. We just heard Tyler talk very passionately about his teachers. None of those teachers are new. All of those teachers have experience with the kids and the families in this building. I know when I was a first-year teacher, I was not my best teacher. I taught 5 different high school preparations in my first year, and I barely slept. My first day, a student in my classroom, Tyler, hold your ears, offered to engage in a sexual act, and a student in the room told me I was younger than her boyfriend. I did not have the capacity to tackle that by myself. There were other challenges of teaching I also did not have the capacity to attack on my own, and I had a lot of strong mentoring from other teachers in my department and my school who were experienced and wonderful. They were like the teachers that Tyler described. This makes me have to give a shout out to Tammy Dexter, wherever she ended up sitting, who was my mentor teacher when I started, and absolutely is the person who taught me how to plan a lesson and plan a unit. She's the only person in the building who shared space with me, and she also taught me how to get support from other teachers. So I could walk in the office and say, I'm teaching Julius Caesar, and I don't know what to do. and I would come back with a stack. I'd go teach class, I'd come back with a stack as tall as me of materials and resources other teachers left for me. When my teachers at GLA say, I'm teaching something I've never taught before, like first grade or fourth grade, there's no one there in the building with a stack of things as tall as them or digital resources completely built out who can just hand them over, because most of them are new. Recently, they did a study of schools in New York City of 850,000 students, and what they found is that teacher turnover in those schools affected any type of school where there was turnover, but the highest negative effects of achievement were in high poverty, high minority schools for the reasons that we already described, because those teachers are replaced by novice or unlicensed teachers. That teacher turnover is at a cost. Nationally, that number is $7 billion annually just to hire and retrain staff. Obviously, this doesn't cost GLA or the EVSC or even Indiana $7 billion. That's our national number. But I think Indiana's number is 25 to 45 million each year. This also costs the time and energy it takes to review candidates and set up and conduct interviews and read people's application materials and check their phone references. And while that's all valid ways to spend a principal's time, it means it's time I can't spend on my current staff, and it's time I can't spend on my current students. It's time my colleagues do spend on theirs. It causes fatigue on my team of teacher leaders who have a strong desire to build on successes from their previous year, but instead of being able to move forward, they're tasked with changing grade levels to create stability in the building, or teaching new teammates, or constantly reviewing last year's PD with our new hires. More importantly, I think, than any of that is the cost to our families, the consistency for our children, and the trust that somebody's going to be there for them the next year. They need and expect stability from us, and what they sometimes get doesn't mirror that. Building trust with families takes time, and it is so much harder when everyone to that equation is new, or if the families believe you're going to be here for a few years and then you're going to leave too. We would not accept this for our own children, so it is not acceptable for children at GLA. The question is, how do we fix this problem? As a society, we keep saying that we want our kids' performance to change. We say that we want no child to be left behind and that every child has promise, but what are we actually doing about it? A student who has instability at home and school can't possibly be expected to become a citizen that models stability for others. The achievement gains we aspire to in our schools will come. They will come when we have stability. They will come when our teachers have more than the minimum level of experience. No child will be left behind when teachers in high-poverty schools get the respect that they deserve. I do believe failing is part of classroom learning. We heard one of our speakers talk about that this morning. But on this issue, we do not have the opportunity to fail. If our schools fail, our community fails. If the 414 students who attend GLA are not successful, Evansville fails. It's not just Evansville, and it's not just GLA. These students are in all of your schools, and as a result, we have to find the solutions that bring success to struggling kids, or this problem will shake the very foundation of our community, our state, and our nation. Other than creating stability, researchers have recommendations for what to do to solve this problem. They include reasonable salaries. I'm not really sure what that means, but we'll come back to that. Dedicated mentors, pre-service training, and meaningful PD. This seems so easy, right? If it were this easy, we would all be working in an A school. This really boils down to our level of commitment. It's kind of like when you're at home and you're watching TV and there's a commercial on about underfed children in third world countries that need your support, and you're empathizing with the plight of the children in the third world country while you drink a Coke Zero and snack on microwave popcorn. And you think to yourself, this is terrible, and I wish there were a way to solve this problem. Once that commercial ends, you might think about it for a second and go back to your TV program. You might choose to donate the 49 cents a day that they ask for, or you might get super motivated, wake up the next day and volunteer in a shelter or a food pantry, or schedule yourself to go on an overseas mission trip with your church. You might even start a legacy project. This is where most of us, though, choose inaction. On this issue, I'm going to ask you not to do that. Even if you do not live in an urban community, we are all outnumbered by those who do. This is not just an urban problem, it's a human one. At a minimum, I'm asking you to change the way you think about it, and as a second step, I would ask you to support ways to fix this problem. Right now, most of you are metaphorically sitting on the couch watching a commercial about high-poverty schools, but I hope you're at least thinking to yourself, what can I do about it? Be more committed than when you walked through the door a few moments ago. You can stay in a high-poverty school if you're already in one. Kids need you, and they need that stability, and teachers need that stability too. Teaching gets easier no matter where you are. It's not about where you are, it's about what you do. You make your school the kind of school that kids and families want to come back to because they know you're still going to be there. If you are not in a high-poverty school, and there are lots of great teachers here who are not, honor the people who are. Don't assume that they're not good over their school grade or their test score. Really, they're teaching circles around other people in this profession. Make your dinner conversation about how to support them and how to support kids of poverty, and not how kids in high-poverty schools can't learn. Volunteer to mentor one of them. Help a new teacher in a struggling school know the difference between what is a teaching struggle and what is a school struggle and what is a student struggle. Support those people so they stay in our profession and they stay in our schools that need them. Write a legislator, a member of the State Board of Ed, or your school board about this issue and encourage them to change the salary structure for high-poverty teachers or provide signing bonuses to people who choose tough schools. Now, I realize if you're not in a tough school, you may think to yourself, why should that person make more money than I do? If you're not going to choose that, that's the reason they should. Indiana could fix this problem of recruitment and retention single-handedly with one solution, if they would change retirement. Police officers retire and draw their pension after 20 years because they have very difficult jobs. I really do not see how this varies from being a teacher in a high-poverty school, except we're not armed. If teachers knew they could retire after 20 years and pursue other passions that they have, they would not only choose high-poverty schools, they would stay in them. Lastly, if you're an experienced or a passionate teacher and you're sitting in this audience today and that number 71 is really bothering you, don't disregard this as a commercial. Don't choose inaction. Instead of mentoring a teacher in a high-poverty school, you could become one. You could choose the mission trip and make a high-poverty school your legacy. If you're as good as the rest of my team, then we will make you number 72.